scream that echoed through Victoria Hospital that night wasn't just from pain. Amara's body convulsed on the bed as the markings on her skin began to move, twisting into impossible shapes. The doctors backed away in horror as her swollen belly contorted, forming what looked like a mouth. And from it came voices, not one, but many, speaking words that would change her life forever. Complete the circle or perish. But to understand how a successful modern woman ended up here, we need to go back to the day she mocked the sacred, the day she cursed her own womb. In the heart of Lekki, where the city's pulse was drowned in the roar of car horns and the hum of neon lights, Amara stood like an ebony statue in her sleek corporate dress. She was the embodiment of the modern Nigerian woman, sharp-tongued, ambitious, and fiercely independent. Yet beneath her polished exterior lay a disdain for the traditions she saw as chains forged by ancestors too timid to embrace progress. The air was thick with incense and the murmur of prayers as Amara attended a family gathering in her cousin Ifeoma's village. It was a ceremony steeped in the sacred, an old ritual to bless the unborn child growing in Ifeoma's womb. The wise women of the village chanted, their voices carrying the weight of centuries, while Ifeoma knelt, head bowed in reverence. Amara laughed, a sound sharp and hollow, cutting through the prayers like a blade. The elders paused mid-chant, their voices faltering as the crowd recoiled. Children huddled closer to their mothers, and Ifeoma's eyes filled with tears of humiliation. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the spirits themselves were stunned by the audacity of her mockery. "All this for a baby?" she said, her voice laced with derision. "What century are we in? This is why we can't move forward." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd, and Ifeoma's face burned with shame. The village elder Mama Anike turned her roomy eyes toward Amara, her voice trembling with a warning. "You mock what you do not understand, child. Beware the spirits who guard what is sacred." Amara smirked, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "Spirits, superstitions. You people cling to these like lifeboats in a storm of irrelevance," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. Then, with a dramatic flourish, she turned to the crowd, raising her hands as if to address an audience. "Let me show you how far we've come from this nonsense," she announced, her tone laced with arrogance. "I'm pregnant too," she declared, placing a possessive hand on her belly. "But unlike this outdated charade, I'll be raising my child with modern science and real education, not rituals and chants." The crowd's silence was heavy, a wall of judgment pressing against her, but she mistook it for awe. Ifeoma's head dipped lower, her humiliation now complete. Even Mama Aniki's eyes, sharp with ancestral wisdom, held a flicker of sorrow that made the moment hang like a curse in the air. She didn't notice the storm clouds gathering in the distance or the faint tingle on her skin that night, a sensation like fireflies dancing beneath her flesh. Days later, in the sterile comfort of her high-rise apartment, Amara first noticed them. Faint, almost imperceptible lines etched themselves across her skin while she slept, forming intricate patterns she vaguely recognized from the village's ancient murals. She dismissed them as stress-induced rashes, but each night, the lines grew darker, more defined. The first time she heard her dead mother's voice, it was faint, like the fragile rustling of leaves in a still room. At first, she brushed it off as a trick of her mind, a ghost of memory stirring in the quiet. But then it grew louder, richer and more deliberate, a haunting melody that seemed to bleed from the very walls of her apartment. Amara froze, her breath catching as a shiver crawled up her spine. Her mother's voice, unmistakable now, called her name softly at first, then louder, more insistent. In that moment, the temperature in the room plummeted. The scent of incense, bitter and acrid, filled her nostrils, and her stomach clenched as if her unborn child had recoiled from the sound. The melody shifted into a chant, words she couldn't fully understand but felt in her very marrow. Amara screamed, clutching her belly as her child moved violently. the rhythm of the kicks unnervingly synchronized with the chant. Terror gripped her, a suffocating, visceral fear she could not shake. That night, as she sat trembling on the cold floor of her apartment, she realized she could no longer dismiss the signs. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, she hurriedly arrived at Victoria Hospital to get checked. And that's when she knew. Her unborn child rebelled against modern interventions with a ferocity that shook her resolve. The first ultrasound sent searing jolts of pain coursing through her body. The screen flickered erratically, distorting the image of the fetus before shutting off entirely, leaving a hollow silence that reverberated in her chest. Every dose of prescribed vitamins turned her stomach into a churning cauldron of nausea, the metallic taste lingering like a bitter curse. Her skin erupted in angry welts when touched by antiseptics, and her body rejected injections, leaving needles bent and useless. As her belly grew, the markings on her skin morphed into symbols she couldn't understand, but felt deep in her bones. She found herself drawn to the earthy, pungent flavors of traditional village foods. Their rich, grounding scents, the only thing that quelled the gnawing, insatiable hunger that clawed at her insides like unseen hands. Each bite felt like an uneasy truce between her and whatever force had taken hold of her pregnancy. Her once pristine apartment transformed into a shrine to the past. The aroma of herbs she hadn't seen in years filled the air. And strange objects, cowrie shells, clay pots, and feathers, appeared in corners where she was certain she hadn't placed them. Her career began to unravel in a slow, agonizing descent. Colleagues, once eager to collaborate, now whispered behind her back, their words dripping with suspicion and disdain. Clients, unsettled by her increasingly unkempt appearance and erratic behavior, began pulling out of deals. Her carefully built reputation as a sharp and reliable professional crumbled. Each day the walls of her office seemed to close in tighter, her confidence eroding as she stared blankly at emails she couldn't bring herself to answer. Desperation clawed at her as the weight of her situation grew unbearable. At night, she lay awake, her thoughts spiraling into dark corners. The whispers of her dead mother haunted her dreams, and the movements of her child became unbearable, sharp, deliberate, and impossibly synchronized with the chanting in her mind. There, Amara began to believe that her only hope of escape would be ending the pregnancy, her only hope of reclaiming her life. But even as she made the decision, the choice felt like a betrayal, an irreversible step that filled her with a deep, gnawing dread. Still, with her life in shambles and the relentless torment of the spirits growing stronger, she convinced herself there was no other way. But the spirits had other plans. The procedure failed spectacularly. As the anesthetic entered her veins, a scream ripped from her throat, raw and primal, reverberating through the sterile walls of the surgical room. Her body convulsed violently, the bed rattling beneath her as if caught in an earthquake. The lights flickered, plunging the room into erratic bursts of shadow and fluorescence. She felt her womb twist and burn, a searing pain that seemed to come alive, screaming with a voice that was both hers and not hers. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the acrid stench of burnt herbs, filling the room with a suffocating miasma. The doctors froze, their faces pale, and their hands trembling as their instruments clattered to the floor, shattered like fragile glass. One of them stumbled backward, muttering prayers under his breath, while another bolted from the room, his shoes squeaking in panic against the tile floor. Amara's vision blurred as she gasped for air, her heart pounding like a drum of war. From deep within her womb came a grotesque transformation. The markings on her skin twisted and writhed, their shapes contorting as if alive. Her belly became the canvas for a macabre spectacle, the patterns converging to form a horrific mouth that stretched and gaped grotesquely. The voice of the spirits erupted from this unnatural maw, their rage and command echoing in an unearthly harmony. Complete the circle, or perish. Amara's scream was drowned out by the chorus of voices, her horror mounting as she realized her body was no longer her own, but a vessel of terrifying purpose. Tears streamed down her face as she lay paralyzed, staring at the horrified face of the remaining doctor, pale and trembling, who whispered, "This is beyond us. You need something else. You must leave." His words were an echo of her deepest shame. Even here, in the realm of science and modernity, she was utterly forsaken. In that moment, Amara's arrogance shattered, leaving only a woman drowning in terror and despair. Amara arrived at Mama Aniki's compound trembling, her once confident strides now reduced to hesitant, faltering steps. The weight of her terror hung heavy in the air, and her eyes darted about as if expecting the spirits to manifest at any moment. She collapsed onto the weathered mat by the elder's feet, her voice hoarse and shaking. "Mama Aniki, please, help me," she whispered, clutching at her belly as if trying to keep it from tearing her apart. The elder's eyes, filled with both sorrow and knowing, rested on her trembling form. "You carry twins," she said. Her words weighted as if each syllable held an ancient truth. "One is a blessing, the other a curse. The spirits are not punishing you, Amara. They are saving you. Your mother ignored the rituals, and it cost her her life." Amara's body shuddered as she listened, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. The markings on her body pulsed with a life of their own, each line carving deeper into her skin, as if responding to the elder's words. The ancestral circle, as Mama Aniki called it, had nearly completed its grotesque formation, the ancient symbol now vivid and undeniable against her flesh. The elder's voice did not waver as she explained its meaning, a binding to the spirits of her ancestors, a sacred conduit that manifested only in times of great peril. "It is both protection and judgment," Mama Aniki said. "The balance between the sacred and the profane hangs by a thread." Amara recoiled at the explanation, shaking her head violently. "No, this can't be real. I don't believe in any of this," she cried, her voice breaking under the weight of her denial. "I'm not like my mother. I'm not some relic. This is all in my head." Mama Aniki's gaze hardened, her voice sharpening like a knife. "You cannot fight what you do not understand, child. The spirits do not care for your belief. They care only that the circle is completed." The twins inside Amara moved again, their kicks forming deliberate, agonizing patterns that seared warnings into her flesh. Her mother's voice grew louder, its once gentle tone now a commanding roar of doom that filled the room with an oppressive presence. Amara's sobs racked her body as she clutched her belly, torn between disbelief and the undeniable horror unfolding within her. "Time is short," the elder said. "The circle must be completed before the birth. If we falter, the balance will shatter, and all will be lost." Mama Aniki led Amara into the sacred hut where a low fire burned. The air was thick with the pungent aroma of burning sage and crushed kola nuts, a blend so potent it made Amara's eyes water. The urgency was palpable. Every moment carried the weight of generations, and Amara could feel it pressing down on her like a physical force. The rituals began immediately. Mama Aniki smeared Amara's body with a thick paste of sacred oils, the cool substance spreading across her fevered skin like a balm. The elder chanted prayers in a deep, rhythmic tone, the words reverberating through Amara's chest and stirring something deep within her. Amara was made to kneel before a small altar, adorned with clay figurines and glowing embers. Mama Aniki placed a steaming bowl in her hands, the bitter concoction inside releasing tendrils of heat that curled into the air. "Drink," the elder commanded. The liquid seared its way down Amara's throat, igniting her stomach like a blazing fire. She doubled over, gasping, as the spirits surged within her, their voices blending into a cacophony of commands and reassurance. Mama Aniki guided her through a procession of rites, washing her hands in water fetched from the sacred river, walking 3 times around the ancient baobab tree, and offering a carved gourd filled with palm wine to the spirits of the ancestors. And guided through each ritual, the veil of Amara's ignorance began to lift. She learned the truth of her lineage. The women in her family were not merely guardians of traditions, but chosen vessels of the sacred, their wombs imbued with the power to connect the mortal and spiritual worlds. Each ritual she completed was like unearthing a buried part of herself, a bridge to the stories and sacrifices of those who came before. For the first time, Amara's defiance gave way to reverence. She saw the rituals not as archaic acts, but as a lifeline tethering her to something vast and eternal. With each step, she felt her strength returning, not just to her body but to her spirit. She began to repeat the chants alongside Mama Anike, her voice gaining confidence, each word feeling like an unspoken apology to the ancestors she had once spurned. Amara's rejection, Mama Anike revealed, had not merely invited a curse, but had disrupted the sacred balance her family was bound to protect. The markings on her body, once grotesque and horrifying, now glowed with an ethereal light, their shapes telling the stories of her foremothers. By the end of the third day, her despair was replaced with awe and a growing reverence, and she began to understand that her role was not a burden but an honor, to be a living link between the past and the future, ensuring the sacred would never be lost. On a stormy night, beneath the ancient baobab tree, Amara completed the final ritual. With a scream that echoed through the heavens, Amara gave birth to twins, one with eyes as dark as the night, the other glowing like the moon. Their arrival was nothing short of miraculous, and the air itself seemed to hum with an ancient power as they took their first breaths. The village erupted in song and dance, the rhythmic drumbeats and ululations reverberating into the starless sky. Elders wept openly, their tears mingling with the rain that began to fall as if the heavens too were rejoicing. Mama Anike, her voice steady despite the storm, declared the twins a sacred gift. They are the balance, the union of the past and the present, the keepers of what must never be lost. Through them, the spirits have restored harmony. Amara, cradling the newborns, felt a profound shift within her. The ceremonial markings on her skin, glowing with ethereal light, seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The twins, one embodying the mysteries of the night, the other, the illumination of truth, were symbols of duality, a bridge between the modern world she once championed and the ancient customs she now cherished. Amara's family gathered around her, their faces no longer marked by the shame she had once inflicted upon them, but by pride and joy. "You have come home," her father whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Even Ifeoma, whose humiliation had started Amara's journey, stepped forward to place a gentle hand on her shoulder, her forgiveness unspoken yet deeply felt. The twins' cries seemed to harmonize with the chants of the villagers, their voices rising in a chorus that celebrated unity, redemption, and the enduring power of heritage. Amara looked around at the faces of those she had once mocked and felt no shame, only gratitude. "I was blind," she said softly, her voice carrying through the gathering. "But the spirits have shown me the way. We are not meant to forget. We are meant to carry both worlds within us." The celebration continued long into the night, the village united as one. Amara's transformation was not merely physical, but spiritual. She was now a living testament to the strength of her lineage. From that day, Amara became a legend, a warning and a beacon. In the village, her name was spoken with reverence, her story passed down as a lesson in humility and respect for the sacred. Children gathered around the elders, wide-eyed as they heard how the proud woman had become a living shrine, her body a testament to the power of tradition. Beyond the village, whispers of her transformation reached the modern world, sparking both awe and skepticism. To some, she was a myth, to others, a cautionary tale. Yet to those who witnessed her return, Amara was undeniable proof that the past, no matter how distant, could never truly be abandoned. Her glowing scars and the twins she bore became symbols of a bridge between two worlds, a stark reminder that to mock one's roots is to invite their wrath. For For those who would forget their roots, her story was a reminder. The past does not die, it waits. And when you mock the sacred will answer. But what about you, dear listener? How many of us are torn between modern medicine and traditional methods? Between what our aunties and grandmothers tell us and what our doctors say? Share your struggles below. This is a safe space. And let's discuss how together we can bridge the gap between the modern and our sacred traditions handed down from generations through folktales from African mythology.